So today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the master blueprint that's used to build some of the world's most massive and ambitious projects. I mean, really think about it for a second. How do you actually manage a project with thousands of people, billions of dollars, and just insane levels of risk, all while you're literally battling the ocean? You definitely don't just cross your fingers and hope for the best. No, you need a rock-solid, globally understood set of rules. So here's our game plan. We're going to walk through the entire life of a massive project, from the initial idea right through to the finish line. We'll look at who the key players are, how you manage the big three, time, money, and quality, and, crucially, what happens when things go wrong. Look, building something enormous is inherently chaotic. Just one simple misunderstanding, one miscommunication can spiral into total failure and financial ruin. So what's the fix? You need a shared language, a rulebook that works whether you're in Dubai or Denmark. And that's exactly what the FIDIC Yellow Book is. It's the contract designed to bring order, clarity, and fairness to the most complex projects on the planet. All right, so who are the actual people making this all happen? Let's meet the three key players in our offshore wind farm project, because literally every single decision revolves around the relationship between these three. First up, you've got the employer. This is the entity with the grand vision and, just as importantly, the deep pockets. They're the ones who say, I want an offshore wind farm right here. They define what it needs to do, and ultimately, they're the ones paying the bills. Next up is the contractor. This is your master builder. And under the Yellow Book, they don't just build what they're told, they also handle the detailed design work. So they take the employer's vision and figure out how to turn it into those massive spinning turbines way out at sea.
And that brings us to maybe the most unique role in this whole system, the engineer. Now, they're not just some technical expert. The engineer is actually appointed by the employer. But, and this is so important, they have to act as a neutral administrator of the contract. Their job is to make fair decisions to keep the whole project on track. They're basically the referee.
And when you lay it all out like this, you can really see how their functions create this perfect triangle of checks and balances. The employer says what and why, the contractor delivers the how, and the engineer makes sure it's all being done according to the rules. The entire contract is built on this very foundation. Okay, with all these documents floating around, and trust me, there are a ton, what happens when they contradict each other? Well, Clause 1.5 solves this with a super clear hierarchy. The signed contract agreement right at the top, that's king. Whatever it says goes. This one simple rule prevents countless arguments down the line. Okay, the team's in place, the rulebook is open. Now we get to the absolute heart of the contract, managing the three critical things that can make or break any project, making sure it's on time, on budget, and actually built to last. You know, time is really the heartbeat of a project, and Clause 8 sets that rhythm. You've got a formal start date, a detailed schedule, and a hard deadline for completion. But FIDIC is also realistic. It knows that stuff happens, right? So it builds in a formal process for an extension of time, or EOT, for when there are delays that are truly outside the contractor's control, like, say, a once-in-a-century storm. And of course, money is the lifeblood that keeps the project going. Clause 14 sets up this really clear, predictable cycle. The contractor submits a detailed statement of all the work they've done, the engineer checks it, and then issues a payment certificate. Then, the employer pays that certified amount. It's a transparent process designed to keep cash flowing smoothly and fairly. But how do you actually guarantee quality? Well, FIDIC is smart about this. It verifies it at two really key stages. First, the contractor has to test parts and components as they're being built to prove they meet the specifications. Then, once it's all done and handed over, the employer gets to run their own tests to make sure the entire wind farm performs as promised out in the real world. All right, so the turbines are spinning, the power is flowing. How do we make it official? How does everybody agree that the job is, well, done? It literally all comes down to one single piece of paper, the taking over certificate. This is issued by the engineer, and it marks the official finish line. It's the exact moment the employer takes the keys, so to speak, and all the major risks transfer from the contractor over to them. But wait, the contractor isn't completely off the hook just yet. The defects notification period is basically the project's warranty. For a set amount of time, usually a year, if anything breaks or a flaw pops up that traces back to the original work, the contractor has to come back and fix it on their own dime. Let's be real. On a multi-billion-dollar project that lasts for years, disagreements aren't just possible, they're practically guaranteed. The absolute genius of FIDIC is that it plans for this, and it builds in a clear process to solve conflicts without having to immediately lawyer up. Remember our referee, the engineer? This is where they really earn their keep. When a dispute comes up, the engineer has to step in, look at the facts with total neutrality, and make a fair determination based on what the contract says. And this isn't just their opinion, it's a decision that's binding on both parties unless one of them formally challenges it. So what happens if one side thinks the ref made a bad call? Well, they can escalate it to the DAAB. That's the Dispute Avoidance and Adjudication Board. This is a small panel of independent experts who are appointed at the very start of the project. Their job is to stay in the loop so that if a dispute does happen, they can jump in and make a fast, expert decision to keep things moving. And this right here, this is the entire escalation ladder. It's designed to be climbed one rung at a time. You start with the engineer. If that doesn't work, you go to the DAAB. Only if that fails do you even think about going to formal arbitration. The whole point is to solve problems at the lowest, fastest, and cheapest level possible. It's all about avoiding an all-out legal war.
Okay, so let's zoom out for a second. We've talked about all these very specific clauses about money and time and disputes. But what's the big idea, the philosophy, that holds this entire thing together?
Well, it really all boils down to these 5 golden principles. You can think of these as FIDIC's non-negotiables. They're the bedrock of the whole system, ensuring that roles are clear, that risk is handed to the party best able to manage it, that timelines make sense, and that there's always a process to solve disputes fairly. You know, contracts like the FIDIC Yellow Book, they're kind of the invisible architecture that allow us to build our modern world. They prove that our most incredible achievements succeed not by chance, but by having a clear, balanced, and fair set of rules that everyone agrees to play by. Which really makes you wonder, what happens to the projects that don't?